Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jess Lenore in Baltimore. President Obama is speaking in Dallas on Tuesday at a memorial service for the 6 officers killed after a Black Lives Matter protest against the killing of 2 black men by police last week. This comes at a time when the issues of police brutality and accountability are at the forefront of popular discussion, but seemingly lacks any meaningful insight or analysis. Well, to give us some of that, we are now joined by Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor from Philadelphia. She's a writer, public speaker, and activist, author of the acclaimed book, From Black Lives Matter to Black Liberation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start off by some of President Obama's previous statements, and he's speaking later today, but here's a clip of what he said on July 10th, addressing the Dallas shootings and the role of protests.
Whenever those of us who are concerned about fairness in the criminal justice system attack police officers, you are doing a disservice to the cause.
And so, we've seen President Obama and a lot of, mainstream figures, of course, speaking out against the attacks on the officers, but also sort of scolding protesters for we've heard it from Rudy Giuliani and others, former New York mayor, that Black Lives Matter protesters are creating this climate in which police officers are afraid, and some even go as far as to blame protesters for the attacks on those Dallas officers. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say 2 things. One, in terms of the way that particularly the right wing has tried to mobilize and use statements, purported statements, by Micah Johnson, the lone gunman who shot and killed 5 police officers in Dallas, Texas, who said something to the effect that he wanted to kill white cops or he wanted to kill white people, that there's been a concerted effort from conservative politicians, but also fraternal order of police unions, of different representatives from around the country who have tried to use that as a way to somehow connect Micah Johnson to the Black Lives Matter movement. And to say that the protest and demands that activists have been making for more than 2 years now, or for almost 2 years now, to have police held accountable for their illegal conduct, and to demand an end to extrajudicial killings by the police, that somehow that has created an atmosphere where police are at harm, I think is completely erroneous. And I think that has to be challenged outright. And I would also say that some of these efforts have also been intended to create an impression that if Black Lives Matter activists weren't protesting or weren't talking about racism and injustice with policing, that somehow people would not be mobilized on the streets and somehow there would not be protest. And I think it's important to clarify that the movement exists not because of personalities or spokespeople of different organizations are talking about these issues. The movement exists because of the behavior of the police, because of the generalized, pervasive experience of Black people in this country being brutalized, harassed, and sometimes killed by the police. That is why people are in the streets. The second thing I would say in response to what Obama says about attacking police, I think it's important to be clear. There was a lone gunman who went and shot 5 police in Dallas, Texas, that had absolutely nothing to do with the movement. And then there have been protests that began before events in Dallas in response to the police killing yet again two black men for absolutely no reason. And so, in general, I think that we would say that people have been protesting peacefully, that it is the police that have shown up at these demonstrations in jackboots looking like they are prepared for war in Baton Rouge, in Minnesota, in Minneapolis in particular. They are the ones who have looked like they have come to peaceful demonstrations like they are ready for combat. And I think that this is indicative of President Obama, who regularly attacks and in many ways, even this conversation is an attempt to demean and smear the movement while saying precious little about the way that police are behaving. He even went so far as to say, I think in that same speech, that the police were going out of their way to protect people's right to protest, which could not be further from the truth. And so we actually have an obligation to continue to speak out, to tell the truth about what is happening, and to really keep the movement on the streets and to keep the pressure on.
Well, I think the streets have spoken in a lot of ways, because over the weekend and including yesterday, hundreds of people have been arrested in protest all over the country. So certainly people are not backing down, and we were just showing images of the military-like response that police used in places like Baton Rouge, where they stormed people's houses that were allowing protesters to be there and did mass arrests. Hundreds of people were arrested over the weekend. But I wanted to also contrast Obama's comments with that of right-wing Republican politicians like Donald Trump, who have focused on the issue of black-on-black crime. Here's a clip of Donald Trump speaking.
We must remember the police are needed the most where crime is the highest. Politicians and activists who seek to remove police or policing from a community are hurting the poorest and most vulnerable Americans. We must maintain law and order at the highest level, or we will cease to have a country. 100%, we will cease to have a country. I am the law and order candidate.
So it's actually really interesting that is the spectrum of, between President Obama and, the Republican nominee, Donald Trump. Talk about talk about the range of discourse we're seeing in this country today.
Well, first I would say that Donald Trump is a discredited racist who is only in this election because of the complete debacle of the Republican Party. And so no one has really solicited his opinion about how to deal with the issue of police brutality and police murder in the United States. But what he says certainly has a resonance with not only racist Republicans who would like to sort of bury their heads in the sand about any issue concerning the police, but also with, I think, the establishment of the Democratic Party, who also invoke misnomers like black-on-black crime as some sort of explanation for problems that exist in urban areas. And I would say, just in terms of where the discourse is, I think that we have to look at that in two different ways. One is what is happening in the mainstream, which is that I think from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, they don't have actually much of any import to say because they don't actually have any solutions. And I think that's one part of it. The other part is what is being pushed and put forward by the movement itself. And so in that regard, I think the existence of the movement is why we are even having a discussion about policing in the United States. Police brutality is not new. But the fact that people have been out on the streets for almost 2 years have forced an understanding that this is not just about rogue cops, this is not just about bad apples, but there is something deeply systemically wrong with policing in the United States that has led to this kind of eruption, not once, but we had the rebellion in Baltimore, we had the uprising in Ferguson, and we've had all number of kinds of demonstrations in places from Raleigh, North Carolina to San Francisco, California in the intervening period. And so that is what has changed the dynamic, is the movement itself. But in terms of the political establishment, they have no solutions, because to legitimately deal with the issue of racist and brutal policing, you would have to deal with the much larger issues of what creates the excuse for police to come into Black neighborhoods in the first place. For activists, I think it's important not to deny that there's crime that happens in poor and working class neighborhoods, but it's to understand why. It's not because of some sort of defect in the people who live in these neighborhoods and communities, but it's really about understanding the consequences of inequality in this country and the way in which poverty creates situations that provide excuses for police to come into those neighborhoods. But police don't actually address crime. Police don't stop crime. And so when we have a situation of pervasive economic inequality and we have a welfare state that barely exists, then police really have been called in to deal with the consequences of that. And as long as elected leaders and the political establishment in general have no plan to deal with those issues, have no plan other than repression, then we will continue to see this dynamic.
Well, Keeanga, we have to wrap up the first part of our conversation, but we hope you can stay for part two, and we will talk about what some of those solutions actually look like. Thanks
Sure.
so much for joining us.
Thanks.
And thank you for joining us at the Real News Network.